Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. It's been a year since Hurricane Helene hit central Appalachia. From the start, the recovery has brought people together.
Help came from everywhere. It didn't matter what school you went to, what political party, or what church. Everybody pitched in and helped.
Country music's Rob McNurlin grew up with traditional music in eastern Kentucky. His friend Marty Stuart says he's a folk hero.
And you cannot go out and become a folk hero for any amount of money. You have to earn it.
And we check up on Virginia rapper and producer Byron Mack.
I rap for my mental health. As a writer, it allows me to stay healthy mentally, to be able to express myself like that.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia.
Support for this program is brought to you by Solar Holler, building on West Virginia's history of powering the nation by bringing solar power to the coalfields. Information at solarholler.com. Support for this program is provided by the Thrasher Group, an architecture, engineering, and field services firm serving West Virginia clients and communities since 1983. More information at thethrashergroup.com.
Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. It's been a year since Hurricane Helene hit the mountains of Appalachia. The storm brought catastrophic flooding and devastated parts of western North Carolina, East Tennessee, and southwestern Virginia. Our partner station Radio IQ produced a documentary about how folks recovered and rebuilt after the storm. We begin the show this week with an excerpt from that special. Here's Roxy Todd reporting from southwestern Virginia.
In Damascus, a friend took Deanna Wolf to look at what was left at the mobile home park where she'd been living for 14 years. Her home was the only one still standing, but the land beneath it had washed away, and most of her belongings were destroyed.
My picture albums were all on the bottom shelf. When I walked in there, some of my little stuffed animals and things like that were all laying on the floor in the mud.
She says she didn't just lose her home, but also her community. She had close-knit neighbors that felt like family.
I never dreamed anything, like that would ever happen. And it just completely destroyed the park. All the houses that were in there were swept down. They were all wrapped around the trees down on the other end where all the trees were, and everything was washed away.
It wasn't clear how long it would take for federal funding to become available.
People would say, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I have no idea.
Damascus town leadership and volunteers began holding meetings. All the buildings in downtown Damascus had been damaged in the flood, so they hosted meetings in the town park. This section of town had actually flooded during a previous flood in 1977, but because of mitigation work the town and the Army Corps of Engineers did to repair the stream bank, the park was untouched by Helene. Damascus town manager Chris Bell recalls that at one of those first town meetings, a group of organizers from White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, came to share their experience of helping each other after their community was flooded in 2016.
And literally passed out a little spreadsheet of a how-to guide of what exactly they did. And that was very powerful. It was in the middle of a town park. We had only had power for a day or two. And several local residents kind of took that to heart and said, hey, we can do that.
Inspired by what worked in West Virginia, residents in Damascus created a nonprofit called Trails to Recovery. Local faith groups joined with the Mennonite Disaster Service and began raising money to help survivors repair and rebuild their homes. They raised nearly $1.7 million in private donations and rebuilt 91 homes in Washington County, including one for Linda and Carl McMurray.
These houses are rated for a Category 4 hurricane, and it's a solid, just all you need. It doesn't have a lot of frills, but it's a good house. And they built it in 3 months.
The McMurrays received assistance from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, but this funding doesn't cover all the costs, points out Damascus town manager Chris Bell.
And a nonprofit can work outside those restrictions and really move in an expeditious manner.
So the newly formed nonprofit, Trails to Recovery, was able to cover the gaps and move quickly. volunteers did all the labor, says Carl McMurray.
Help came from everywhere. They didn't matter what school you went to, what political party or what church. Everybody pitched in and helped. And that just shows you the goodness in the country, even though we dwell on a lot of the negatives.
One of the volunteers was 73-year-old Mary Gale in Damascus. Like many, she spent months mucking out buildings and rebuilding homes.
The Lord blessed me with being small enough and agile enough that I could get underneath the houses and pull out all the old insulation and the ductwork and the sticks and everything. And I wore my mud well.
She and a neighbor began helping the morning after the flood.
And then he said, "We've got to feed everybody tomorrow morning." And so he has a camp stove in his RV. And so we parked at the end of the street and fed breakfast to everybody who walked by the next morning.
In addition to feeding neighbors and cleaning out wet insulation from flooded homes, she also helped drive Amish and Mennonite volunteers when they needed groceries or supplies.
They loved the mountains. They loved hiking. They would take off as soon as they finished their meal, as quickly as they finished their meal. And that was after working all day. I could be in a horrible mood and I could join them. And within an hour, I was at total peace.
Helene didn't only destroy homes. The entire water system that supplied Damascus needed to be rebuilt. Bridges were washed out. Hundreds of roads in Virginia were damaged or destroyed. The tourism industry also took an enormous hit from Helene. Most of the small businesses in Damascus rely on bike riders from the Virginia Creeper Trail, which was severely damaged in the storm. Many of the business owners here weren't sure if they could reopen. David Phillips works at Adventure Damascus Bicycles, one of several bike rental businesses in town that used to bring tourists to the top of the mountain to ride down into Damascus.
And at the end of the week, Michael, our owner, he called everybody in and laid everybody off. He's like, "Guys, I think that's it. This is just completely done." 27 years, and we were all rather surprised. I'm even choked up about it.
The damaged section was through the top half of the trail, which is the most popular. On this stretch, you can ride downhill through the national forest. On the bottom half, between Abington and Damascus, you have to pedal a little harder. That part of the trail did reopen, and Adventure Damascus began shuttling bikers to Abington.
And it was like a glimmer of hope, though we still didn't know what the new normal was going to be like. It's just so many people ride the upper half of the trail.
After the flood, Scott Little and his wife's small shop, Green Cove Collective, closed. They had been set up along the Creeper Trail between the top of White Top Mountain and Damascus.
And we were basically a general supply for all the bicyclists that came down the trail. So coffee, hot chocolate, had a wood-burning stove. People could warm up, get snacks, take a break.
They did some brainstorming and eventually decided to move their business down to Damascus, at least until the Creeper Trail is fully repaired.
We've had to pivot, and shift the way we think about retail here in this location because the customer needs are different, so we have to adjust accordingly. And we also have to adjust our expectations. We go from 250,000 people a year to riding this trail to a fraction of that post-Helene.
They sell different things now, too. More clothing, some vintage camping and hiking gear, since Damascus attracts hikers from the Appalachian Trail, which runs through town. He's hoping businesses here can stay open, but it's been tough.
And it is quiet and sleepy right now, and there are days when some of these shops make $100 and they barely make enough to pay rent. That's going to be what it's going to be for a while, until the trail's back.
Their shop isn't the only new business in Damascus. Angie Wood is co-owner of Bad Bagel's Pet Emporium. She says after Helene, the town's coffee and ice cream shop invited them to share their space. Both businesses help pay expenses and are hoping they can kind of help each other get through this economic slump.
And so it's really fun. We can come in, you can shop for your pet, but you can also grab some amazing desserts, ice creams, coffees that are all made in-house. So we hope that in the next 2 years, when the Creeper Trail is back, the entire town will come back in full force. But for now, we're having to get creative. This is one example of how, as a town, we're trying to stay alive.
Congress allocated money to rebuild the Creeper Trail, and the Forest Service estimates the project will take hundreds of millions of dollars. It may fully reopen in fall of 2026, but with the extent of the damage, the work could stretch into 2027. Winter is always a slow season for Damascus. After Helene, the winter took on another level of heaviness, says town manager Chris Bell.
Winter is depressing because now all the leaves are gone, and now you're really seeing what the flood did. So you're really just looking at flood damage day in, day out. I remember the first days of spring where things started blossoming, and it kind of hid those scars, which was nice because you weren't constantly reminded of just what happened.
And with spring came new riders to the bottom half of the Creeper Trail. Folks like Kevin Bounds, who traveled from North Carolina with his granddaughters and his grandson Isaac.
We're taking a shuttle up there at 3 o'clock, and then we're going to be riding down back to Damascus.
And they're avid bike riders. They like to go into a park or a greenway somewhere to ride bikes. So this is going to be their first adventure with a 17-mile ride.
It's going to be his first time riding 17 miles on a bike as well.
A few weeks ago, a new fly fishing shop opened in Damascus. The town has started organizing new events this year to promote the area's draw as a trout fishing destination, says Bell.
We stock the streams with trout. Even without stocking the streams, there's just a lot of large trout in the area.
There's still a lot of work ahead, but Bell and others in Damascus say they feel more hopeful now about the town's future.
That was Roxy Todd. You can hear the full documentary at Radio IQ. Erwin, Tennessee was near the epicenter of Helene's destruction, and it saw extensive damage along the Nolichucky River. NPR's Rolando Arrieta visited the area to meet with whitewater rafters and find out how the cleanup is going.
When Amelia Taylor learned outfitters near the Nolichucky would remain closed this season, she needed to make up the lost income. She went from being a professional whitewater river guide,
and now I'm a professional trash lady.
Taylor has been a river guide in the area for 16 years. She says picking up trash along the river is not terrible, despite the occasional bump, scrape, and bruise.
And in some ways, I honestly like this job more. I like to say the trash is easier to deal with than people.
And so with just me and a microphone to deal with, Taylor and her cleanup crew head down the lower Nolichucky on big 6-person rafts.
Oh, yeah. She's back in the flow now.
The garbage is piled so high, we can barely see the rapids ahead. Car parts, toys, household items, and lots of...
sheet metal, piece of somebody's roof. I'm going to kind of throw it. Don't be scared. I'm going to try not to pop the raft either. I'm going to just throw it kind of right here.
As we peel out of an eddy and continue downstream, Taylor scouts the rapid up ahead.
This next part looks really challenging. We should have gone up that way, but I do need you to get your paddle in your hand. Let's go 1 forward. 2 forward. Keep going forward.
Lily Johnson and her husband own a local rafting company. They bought it last year. 6 months later, Helene hit.
So we haven't had a second season of rafting like we, pictured when we purchased the business.
Then a baby girl arrived. Johnson says, while it's been an uncertain year, at least their building is still standing. So for now, they'll use their rafts and staff to clean up the river.
It gives us a chance to put our guides to work. They're still doing what they're trained to do in, paddling down the river in a raft. And we're cleaning up our watershed so that it's ready for us when we're ready to get back out there.
And they're seeing progress. Guides like Taylor and dozens more are doing cleanup missions nearly every day. Helene's destruction throughout the Nolichucky Gorge was massive. Debris flow landslides hurled chunks of railroad tracks and hazardous material into the river. Trey Moore, a local paddler, teamed up with a few outfitters to form a nonprofit and work alongside local, state, and federal agencies to help the county's outdoor tourism, economic recovery, and river restoration.
And we were able to go and take care of the river that has always taken care of us.
The U.S. Forest Service hopes to reopen the river access points next spring. Moore says they have their work cut out for them. Guides need to be retrained, It's a new river with new rapids and new risks.
And so this destruction and fundamental change of this insanely large geologic event is an opportunity for a rebirth and an opportunity to reconnect with the river, with the community, and to heal.
Local paddlers have started to informally refer to the river as the Nolichucky. Rolando Arrieta, NPR News, Irwin, Tennessee.
Coming up, the story of Kentucky country musician Rob McNurlin. You are Inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for WVPB is provided by the Huntington Museum of Art, presenting Joyful Spirits, Haitian art from the Winslow Anderson Collection through February 8, 2026. Details at hmoa.org.
Rob McNurlin has been called a one-of-a-kind musical artist and a modern-day troubadour. Here's what country music star Marty Stuart had to say about him.
The thing I love about Rob, when I first came to Nashville, if you sat down at the table of the family of country music, it was important that you, at that time, that you bring your culture with you. Wherever you come from, you had to bring who you were to the table and add into the spice of country music. It's pretty much a homogenized table these days. But the thing I love about Rob, he carries that square piece of Kentucky with him everywhere he goes. And you cannot go out and become a folk hero for any amount of money. You have to earn it, you have to live it, and that's what you have to be every day of your life to become that. And when I think of Rob, I know that in truth he's a folk hero. His music, his art, everything from his chainsaw art to the songs he writes to his performances to everything about it, the shows he stages and the people he hangs out with, you know, he's a folk hero. He represents the best of Kentucky and actually the best in all of us.
That clip is from the documentary The Cowboy's Boot Heel, the musical journey of Rob McNurlin. It's by filmmaker Colonel Stephen Middleton. For decades, Rob McNurlin has played hole-in-the-wall bars, clubs, and coffee houses throughout Central Appalachia. He's recorded songs, made videos, and even hosted television programs, but was never able to break into the mainstream. After McNurlin announced plans to retire, Middleton asked if he could tell the singer's story. Bill Lynch spoke with Middleton.
How does one become a Kentucky Colonel?
So Kentucky Colonel is the highest title the Kentuckian can achieve, and it's through the organization of the Honorable Order of Kentucky Colonels, and it goes all the way back to the very first governor of Kentucky, who had his son-in-law as part of his cabinet, and he didn't have an official title for him, so they just called him Colonel, so it started a tradition. Now, to be a colonel, you have to be nominated by another colonel, and so I've nominated other people before. You have to provide two things you've done for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and mine, of course, was filmmaking and teaching. So I'm very honored that someone thought of me, and I like the title of Colonel. It's more than fried chicken, so that's what most people think.
How did you get into filmmaking?
Well, there's only two things I ever wanted to do in my life. I grew up in rural Access, Kentucky, and northeast part of the state, and not that far from the West Virginia border, and, kind of growing up in the 90s the way I did, I watched a lot of movies. I just sit around and watched movies, and that was kind of my thing, is staying up late watching movies and TV shows, and, the more obscure the better, from Twin Peaks to Northern Exposure and the X-Files on the TV side, and then, I kind of just got into watching the classic movies that everyone watches, but then kind of got down niche roads. And I would get West Virginia Public Broadcasting where we lived in Kentucky, and I would stay up late, especially in the summers, and catch some of those late night documentaries they would air, and those Jacob Young films, those different drummer series from back in the late 80s and early 90s, they would play those. And I thought they were so cool. I thought it was, filmmaking itself can be very trepidatious, but I could produce a documentary with very crude camera technology, and that pretty much was it. I loved music, and I loved filmmaking, and that was kind of my two career goals, was to do something with either of those. So I just got into making films, and, as you go, you kind of learn as you go, and I still don't know if I know what I'm doing, but I'm just excited that anyone would remember or want to watch any of my films. And working with Rob, finally channeled those two areas of music and film into one project, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm really proud to work with Rob and to have been able to help Rob get back out there on the road, because he was at the point of retiring from live music before I made the film, and this has given me a little boost, and so I'm very proud of that, Bill.
As far as you as a filmmaker, what attracts you to a project or to a story?
From growing up in this region and being from this region, there's so many fascinating people. I've always been fascinated by people and people's stories. And in a lot of ways, Appalachian people are natural storytellers, and whether we realize it or not, my grandmother would speak to me like old school Hemingway novel, like give you all the facts, just the situation, Debbie and them, they're having a big time. Well, they've done this, just the way of talking that Appalachian people did. And so I always like people's stories. And growing up, I always found it interesting when I would run into people who had been to far-off places, people who had been to Europe and Asia and places. And I just found their stories so fascinating. And early on, I learned that, I'm not the guy to tell stories of issues, larger Appalachian issues, especially with environment and labor and things. I could teach a class on that, but as a filmmaker, I'd much rather focus on a personal story, an individual story. And our region is filled with so many good stories that don't get told, and so I always hoped that in my filmmaking I could help get stories out there. And that's why those films, like those Jacob Young Different Drummer films, spoke to me, because they were about just interesting people, Bill, telling people's stories.
If you don't mind, talk a little about your relationship with Rob McNurlin and how you first met.
Well, okay, so I worked at a coffee shop. The coffee shop, you were a jack of all trades. You had to make drinks and food, and then when we had live music, we also had to run sound. So sometimes it could be very precarious running between the three positions. And, of course, love music, and, I always liked folk music, and I loved Bob Dylan, the Grateful Dead, and the band, and Neil Young, and, that was kind of my wheelhouse back then in the early 2000s, and we had a lot of bluegrass artists then and a lot of country singers. And I remember very specifically, I got yelled at the week before I first met Rob, because I honestly didn't know exactly what I was doing running live sound. It was learning on the fly, and no one gave us any instructions. I got yelled at. They didn't like the sound, and there was feedback happening, and their vocals wasn't heard. And the next week, this very tall man in a duster jacket and a cowboy hat and a Western suit that I'd only ever seen Marty Stuart or Porter Wagner wear walks in, and I was intimidated by him. And he was followed by this guy that at the time looked like Captain Caveman, and that was Dave Prince, who's now the laid-back country picker. Well, he comes in and immediately said, "Hey, I'm Steven. I'm going to run sound tonight. How can I help you?" And he said, "Well, this is what we need. We need 3 mics. We need one here, one here, one here, and I'm going to sing here." And he goes, "How about we set up and we do a test song and see how it is?" And I said, "Okay." And so we set it up, and there was some things that wasn't great. And he comes over and he says, "Well, here's what you need to do. Just do this and this and this." And he was showing me how to run sound essentially. And he played and he liked it, and he was just the nicest guy. And then after that first show, I just chit-chatted with him. He was playing harmonica, and I talked to him about a harmonica. And, I said, "I can play harmonica. What harmonica do you play?" "Well, these are Horner Special 20s, and I like these. They're a little expensive." And I said, "Well, hey, what did Dylan play on Blonde on Blonde?" He knew exactly. And I was like, well, what about Neil? What did he play? He knew exactly. And then we went down the rabbit hole of talking about, Jerry Garcia, and we've been pals ever since. And, the friendship of life on the road, I played in a string band for a while, and sometimes we would see Rob as we were traveling around. But, a lot of times it was, two ships in the night, and I saw he had a Facebook post that he was retiring, and it floored me because I thought, man, this guy did what I always wanted to do, like tour the world, play music, and songs you wrote. And that's kind of how the film began. I just sent a cold message, hey, pal, hate to hear this. Want to do a film about your life and career? And that's kind of how it all started.
With your film, what do you want people to know? What do you want them to take away from this piece on Rob?
Well, I think a lot of people take for granted the people in their world and in their life. And, the more media we consume, especially with negative social media, the more bitter we're becoming as a people and more jaded. And I don't think a lot of times people realize there's people in our worlds right now that are good human beings and souls that bring peace to us and others, and you don't always think about them. And there's people in our worlds right now that you don't even realize that we saw this morning on our way to work, or we'll see, this weekend. But just think about how there's positive people around us and good people around us, and how sometimes we don't always notice what's right under our nose.
So the toughest part for doing a film like this, was it difficult knowing as much as you know about the man?
Yeah. The one good thing was the last time I really interacted with Rob was about 2009 and 10, and that's when he moved to Nashville. And, I kept up with him on social media here and there, but, I hadn't really hung out with him and spent time with him in a while. And so that was good. So I knew all of his, early stories, but I didn't necessarily know all the stuff from 2009 and 10 up till about COVID. So that was good. Rob's a great storyteller. Rob has been a TV host. He had some shows there in Huntington, West Virginia on the air, the Beatnik Ranch Party. And I knew he would be a great interview, but I also wanted to make sure that, we got all these good stories out. And it's more than just his stage show where he talks about his personal life. And when you do anything for 30 years, whether it's, be a teacher or a postman or, any trade, you hope people remember you. You worry about that. And, that was one thing I noticed about Rob is I think he worried that he never left an impact on people. And so I wanted to make sure we got that part of the story out there. And majority of the film, was some pretty heavy hitters in the music industry talking about Rob, what Rob has meant to them, and, sort of the good side of what he has brought to people, and not just music, commercially, but just being a kind person.
So what's next?
Well, that's a good question. We've been so busy with this film. So we debuted it in April and did showings all over. We did screenings in Nashville and Lexington, Kentucky, and Huntington. We kept doing all of this all summer, and so I've been very busy in the sense of it's hard for my mind to think a lot about projects, but I really like telling these Appalachian stories and things that people don't necessarily always know. And but I do. It's going to be Appalachian themed, I'll say that. Also, Rob and I are writing a sci-fi film.
You're writing a sci-fi film?
And, yeah, and it's called Wagon Wheels from Space. It's a Rob McNurlin story that he wrote himself. And we're trying to slowly write that into a screenplay form, but that's on the horizon at some point. But yeah, I've got some ideas, and hopefully moving forward. But more than anything, I'm just kind of enjoying this recent film.
Awesome, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Invasive carp are a nuisance in waterways across the country. The carp reproduce quickly and crowd out native species. They're even a hazard to boaters. A Southern Kentucky high school teacher and his students are using the invasive fish to feed injured raptors like bald eagles, vultures, and hawks. For the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom, WEKU's Sam Dick has more.
Somerset Independent High School teacher Hank Jevitin steers his red pickup truck into the parking lot of a flea market near the Lake Cumberland Wildlife Refuge. His truck is pulling a trailer with a couple of old refrigerators and a freezer filled with carp.
Let's show you a big silver, and then I'll show you a big hake. Come on down, guys.
Jeviden has just returned from an early morning drive from Kentucky Lake. It straddles Tennessee and Kentucky. He has 1,000 pounds of carp caught overnight in a fishing tournament. Carp won't bite on a traditional lure and hook. Instead, fishermen use a bow and arrow.
How about that?
Jeviden lifts one of the largest fish, about 40 pounds, over his head to smiles and applause from the crowd of dozens of students and volunteers.
Now that's a good size silver. On my guys who've been getting ready for this, don't worry, I got 1,000 pounds of fish. There is fish for everybody.
Jeviden and students from his engineering class put on work aprons and sturdy gloves. Under a tent, they've covered wood tables with blue plastic and set up an assembly line to fillet, trim, and package freezer bags of fish meat. Jeviden demonstrates the process.
Watch as you're cutting. Come in, separate the meat from the carcass the same way you did with the bluegill. Okay?
The carp meat will feed injured birds of prey that are in rehab at the Lake Cumberland Wildlife Refuge. The nonprofit is on a tight budget, and Executive Director Kimmy Sparkman appreciates the donation of fish food.
Bald eagles especially love fish. They are fishermen at heart. If you could give them a rabbit or a fish, most days they'll choose the fish. So Hank's program is perfect for us because it allows us to give these birds what they want, what they desire.
Specialist for invasive species at the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife praised Jeviden and his students for using carp as food for raptors because it solves two challenges. Carp are invasive in Kentucky and other southern states. They can dominate lakes by eating vast amounts of plant life that other fish species need. Larger carp can injure people by jumping and colliding with boats. Sparkman says the event also helps the refuge.
Hank is not only reducing our cost, he's taking invasive species out of the wild, and all the leftover parts, it's not wasted. That goes on to organic farmers for compost. So it's a full circle thing. Every part is used.
At school, Jevidin's engineering students are working to create a machine that will help separate all the bone from the meat in carp. Student Rylan Bradley says it's not your typical class.
It's very different. It's fun, it's hands-on. We're using our brain a lot to think of ways to automate the process.
Jeviden says he's proud of the feeding program.
2 months ago, this was a dream. A month ago, we went and got our first load of fish. And you know, any day you get to fish and then take that fish and freeze it and know that it's going to feed an eagle or an owl or a hawk in rehab, man, that's a good feeling.
He hopes to have another carp rodeo, as he calls it, in the spring.
We have been blessed with a large harvest of fish. Thanks again for all my students being here. I'm glad everyone is here. Have some fun.
That was from WEKU's Sam Dick for the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom. A couple years ago, I reported on one of Appalachia's most influential music recording studios. This week, we're revisiting that story. It begins in the city of Salem, Virginia.
Tom Olmsson has been around music his whole life. His uncle played trumpet in jazz bands and got him his first tape recorder when he was just a kid.
I got just a basic quarter-inch reel-to-reel recorder with a cheap microphone.
When Olmsson went to college, he started playing music himself, mostly bluegrass.
Ended up picking up the mandolin because I had a roommate who had just an old mandolin he kept in the corner, and he never played it.
Around the same time, he got into college radio. That gave him a chance to practice his recording skills with bluegrass musicians.
Those people were demanding that somebody mix them according to the protocol of bluegrass and old-time music, and I just happened to be in that world.
That led to bluegrass musicians making regular visits to Olmsson's college radio station, where they'd play live on air.
We started getting some name groups coming in the studio and doing just live two-track recordings. We were getting bands like the Seldom Seen, got to meet Bill Monroe. He allowed us to record one of his sets at a local festival, and Ralph Stanley, got to know him fairly well.
Olmsson eventually opened his own recording studio, first in his house, and then in a space in downtown Salem, Virginia. It catered to local bands and to bluegrass musicians who knew Olmsson would record them properly. Then one day, Olmsson got a call from the owner of a Roanoke-based sound and event company. It turned out a Charlottesville promoter was looking for a quiet, out-of-the-way place for a band to record an album. But there was a catch. Olmsson had to keep it a secret.
They tried to record at a studio in Charlottesville, and the recording was going okay, but there was such a buzz going on that they couldn't get anything done. There were just crowds of people were showing up because it was a local sensation. So it was kind of this undercover thing for 6 or 8 months.
And that's how the Dave Matthews Band ended up at Flat 5.
Satellite in my eyes like a diamond.
They recorded between 150 and 200 hours that would become part of their debut album, Remember Two Things. Remember Two Things was released in the fall of 1993. Soon after, Dave Matthews Band exploded in popularity, becoming one of the defining acts of the 90s. And that, in turn, made Flat 5 a hot destination for bands hoping to make a splash.
I was swamped with regional and local bands. I was working 6 and 7 days a week, but I felt like I had to do what I could do with it while the demand was there.
Along the way, Flat 5 became one of Western Virginia's premier recording studios. Olmsson just kept rolling with it, until a few years ago, when he started to think about retiring.
Last year, I turned 68, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to be here at 75.
So Olmsson made plans to pass the studio to a new owner, but not one who'd do things exactly the way he had. Instead, he zeroed in on one of his employees, a part-time engineer named Byron Mack. Like Olmsson, Mack came from a musical family.
I am the nephew of the jazz singer Jane Powell. My grandfather is the one that got her into music. His name was Eddie Powell. I'm third generation musician from my family.
But while Olmsson got into bluegrass, Mack was all about rap and hip-hop. His Aunt Jane encouraged him to pursue it.
As a 17-year-old, I was writing rhymes, and she found my rhyme book and had a bunch of profanity-laced stuff in it. Just, young kid writing crazy stuff. But she was like, hey, if you clean this up, I'll let you come out and rap with my band. And that's where everything started.
Jane Powell did more than give her nephew a chance to perform.
It got to a point where it's like, man, we need our own beats. And couldn't get anybody to hook us up with any beats or anything. And so my Aunt Jane bought me my first beat machine for my 18th birthday.
Mack was still living at home with his mom, but he was already starting to produce music. Like Olmsson, he started with a makeshift studio in his house.
To tell you how small things were, I slept on a mattress, and I would literally take that mattress out of the walk-in closet so the artist could have room to go in and record their song. And then when they get done, I'd slide the mattress back in the closet because the room was so small.
Mack's hustle and initiative eventually put him on Olmsson's radar. In 2005, Mack went to work at Flat 5.
Olmsson says it was a good fit from the start, and not just on the technical end.
Very good handling clients and, smoothing over ruffled feathers.
Mack says Olmsson started talking to him about retirement in 2018. It took another 4 years to close the deal, but finally, in 2022, Mack became Flat 5's new owner. He's expanded it to incorporate more of his work in hip-hop and R&B.
Of course, being a hip-hop artist, I've been able to bring in some more hip-hop elements that didn't exist before. I still do graphic design, website design. We really try to make it a one-stop shop for an artist so they don't have to go anywhere else.
He's continued to work with Flat 5's old clients, but he's brought in new artists too, especially hip-hop artists. Olmsson told me he thinks that's the studio's future. That's not to say it's all been easy going. even with Flat Five's long history.
There's still a few people around that have come here for years, but it's still a new business. I'm new. There's new elements to it.
But then again, Byron Mack's been working as a music producer for decades at this point. Just like Tom Olmsson, he started at home before moving up to Flat Five. He wants to keep building and turn the studio into a destination for musicians across the East Coast.
My long-term goal for Flat Five is to be that go-to spot when you have to travel to Southwest Virginia.
And in doing so, Byron Mack is keeping Tom Olmsson's vision and the craft of music production alive and thriving.
I'm the best of the beasts here. I'm working, keep requesting a feature. They call me king of the mountain. I'm investing in my region.
Since that story aired in the summer of 2023, Byron Mack has been through some changes. I sat down with him at his home in Salem. Byron Mack, thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia.
Good to be with you, Mason. Always is, man.
The last time our listeners heard you on Inside Appalachia, you had purchased Flat Five Studio, but facing a daunting task of running a studio in the 2020s. So would you mind sharing maybe kind of what's happened since then?
It almost seems like forever ago when I made that purchase. I was trying to keep something going that had been going at that point for 30 years, and got in and even made like a lot of improvements. Just updated the place. But as I took over, a lot of the what I would say the old school clientele, it's like they retired with Tom, and so there was no bad blood or any bad service rendered or anything like that. But those people retired with the business, kind of. And at that time, I was trying to keep something going and battling against myself, being my health at the time. And so it was really hard to keep it going. And I finally had to bring it to a conclusion back in June of 2024.
But you never stopped recording. You're still doing production work. You're still working with clients. You're still making your own beats.
Yeah, the cool thing is one of my interns from Flat Five back years ago had got hired by Roanoke City to open up a studio in the old Fishburne mansion. He said, hey, why don't you come over here and engineer with us? I ended up getting a job with Roanoke City audio engineering over in the community center at Fishburne Mansion. It gave me an opportunity to make money without the overhead of dealing with owning the studio. And they give me like a pretty free reign to be able to do what I need to do. So it's a great situation, actually.
You're still writing rhymes, still making albums, but you alluded to it, had some struggles with health. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about that.
The whole inspiration behind my album is titled But I Lived is because I had reached a point back in 2018, early 2019. I had tore my patellar tendon, and it was actually on the road. I was on the way to do a gig. The crazy thing is I still did the gig. I still performed because I was just like really underestimating the injury. And then come to find out even later that night, I had fractured my ankle as well. So the fact that I stood up for 30 minutes and performed, that's a whole nother thing. But when I was in the hospital, they had said, Mr. Mack, do you realize you have chronic kidney disease? And I wasn't really familiar with the complications of that. But they was like, well, we'll manage it. And I hear that we'll manage it. So like, that's what sticks in my mind. Over time, since like 2019, I would just notice these subtle changes in my body function and my kidney function, of course, in particular. And my leg would always stay really swollen. And no matter what type of treatments they would give me to get fluid off my leg, it would not leave. And I was like, is this like a me thing? Is something I'm doing wrong? And I come more to find out that my kidneys was unable to process different things to keep that fluid off of my leg. And so what started happening, that fluid started going to other places. It ended in me going on dialysis back in early December of 2024. But it's worked out to where like I feel great since I've been on that. Yes, I do need a kidney transplant, but right now I felt the best that I've felt in a long time. You see, I have a 8-year-old daughter. From the time from her being born to 7, she has never seen me run, much less even move fast. And I still would go out and do like these co-op sports programs with her, even though I couldn't even like run. And I'd be out there struggling But, it's your kid. So it's like, you do anything for your kid.
And so you went through the experience with the studio. You had the health scare with your kidneys. You being a parent. You're still producing music for other people. You're still producing your own music. You're performing.
Yeah.
What keeps you going through all that?
I have to remind myself all the time, because being so caught up in the business side of things, sometimes you can lose what the original drive and the original intention was. And I remind myself constantly, it's for mental health. I rap for my mental health. As a writer, it allows me to stay healthy mentally, to be able to express myself like that. I rap because it keeps my mental health where I need it to be. My first show back after I went on dialysis, I had scheduled in Raleigh, North Carolina. I get there and I'm nervous. Like, I'm not nervous really before shows, but this was like, all right, I've been doing this dialysis 3 times a week and this and that. Let's see how my body reacts. And I got up and I knew after I made it to the 3rd song that I was like, I'm back.
Byron Mack, thank you much for talking with us, man.
Thank you, Mason. Always, always.
That was Salem, Virginia rapper Byron Mack. He has a new album with his longtime collaborator Van Guns coming out in November. His next solo album is titled But I Lived. It'll be released in early 2026.
Prepared my daughter so she brave enough. But my big fear by having gave enough, or even dying broke for not saving up. I love your mama, I guess marriage wasn't made for us. I told Janice I would do better. November gone, new weather, pick a few sweaters. Another life event throwing news at us. We at the end of the days, is where the moon met us. Time expired, I'm ready for a new setting. Giving new lectures through a smooth message. Off to paradise where I'm two-stepping. Thought I was a mountain god, mere mortal, who guessed?
Healing Appalachia was held in Ashland, Kentucky a few weeks ago. The 3-day music festival celebrated recovery and included performances by Chris Stapleton, Tyler Childers, and Molly Tuttle. This year, Healing Appalachia worked with the Matthew Perry Foundation, which was founded shortly after the actor's death. The organization supports groups tackling addiction in their communities. WVPB's Randy Yohe attended Healing Appalachia and spoke with Matthew Perry Foundation Program Director Nick Gaines.
And tell me how the Matthew Perry Foundation got involved here in Appalachia.
Yeah, so we just started a little under 2 years ago, right around when Matthew died. And when we first started, we wanted to support grassroots organizations throughout California. And then after we'd done that, we said, where is there the largest need? Where is there the most concentration of addiction in the country? And sadly, it's here in Appalachia. Specifically, West Virginia has the worst rates of addiction for opiates in the entire nation. And we were also looking to find ways to combat stigma. And you couldn't have drawn up something that hits every mark in those 2 categories than Healing Appalachia and Hope in the Hills.
You've become partners with this group over the last, 1 or 2 years?
Just the last year. This is our first year that we've done anything outside of California, and we couldn't have found a better partner to be part of our national expansion.
And so when we just met, we were over there at Camp Grindstone, which is the camp for the 400 in recovery volunteers. You guys are covering them with dinner and tents and the whole 9 yards.
That's right. We're going to have not just the camping and the food, but also they'll have recovery meetings. They're going to have yoga. There's music going on over there right now. Really a wraparound experience for folks that, like you said, there's 400 people camping out there. There's another 500 to 600 coming in during the day to volunteer. And all of it is really to reward these folks that have been in their recovery programs for 6 months, a year, 2 years. And they really earned the opportunity to work this festival, get some important job training, get some certification for being like a peer resource support specialist, just giving people pathways from crisis to careers. That's what it's all about.
Tell me about the Matthew Perry Foundation. I mean, Chandler Bing, I don't remember his character on West Wing, a beloved actor that had his own challenges. Tell me about the foundation.
You know, Matthew, he wrote a book just before he died, and one of the key quotes from that book that is our North Star is, it's for all the sufferers out there. You know, he said, you know, for years leading up to his death, he wanted to be remembered for helping people that were struggling to recover from addiction like he was, and that's what he wanted to be known for, more even than being known for Friends or any of the movies and TV projects he did over the years. This is what he wanted to be known for, helping people recover, giving them the resources and giving them the knowledge that he didn't always have, being in the position he was. So this is really just about honoring his legacy and meeting the mission of helping as many people as possible. That's what he wanted to do.
Right enough. What do you think Matthew would think about if he was here right now?
Oh, he would be so stoked, man. I mean, he would be so stoked. This is, you know, what we always said when we were first joining up with this is we could lead a campaign to do some multi-million-dollar anti-stigma campaign, you know, like the Truth Out action against tobacco and stuff. But ultimately, if you want to tackle stigma, this is how you do it. You got 1,000 people here in recovery working the festival, and they're just like everybody else. You wouldn't be able to point out who in this crowd is in recovery and who isn't. And that's ultimately what fighting stigma is all about, showing that it's not about us versus them, it's all of us together.
That was Matthew Perry Foundation Program Director Nick Gaines, speaking with Randy Yohe. Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Jeff Ellis, Rob McNurlin, Larry Rader, and Byron Mack. Bill Lynch is our producer. Abby Neff is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editor Jennifer Gorin. You can find us on Instagram @inappalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/insideappalachia to subscribe to our newsletter and stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.